may we request the protocol officers and DFA Unio to help shepherd people in? Thank you.
Start na siya. So once na dumating si
So yun yung finally like ito na nga.
Hi, everyone. May we request all the participants to please take their seats. We will begin in 1 minute. Thank you, everyone, for promptly settling down. And we hope that those who joined us for the first part in our YouTube live streaming are back also joining us for this symposium that's coming up. Now, to formally open the second part of our program, we are pleased to call back on stage Undersecretary Jesus Gary Domingo of DFA UXCA for his opening remarks.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Oh, God, it's Gary again. All right. So, well, anyway, you're stuck with me whether you like it or not. Right. So, well, distinguished guests, colleagues in government, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. And now we get to really the heart of our celebration of International Humanitarian Law Day as we open the symposium on international humanitarian law in the Philippines, different perspectives. As chair this year, it was DFA's intention not to hold just a ceremonial event, but also deepen our understanding and awareness of current and emerging IHL related issues in our country. But also this is like very nostalgic, emotional for me because in my previous job as ASEC for UNIO, I had also the privilege of working with the DND AFP as we organize IHL Day and IHL Month. Now the task falls on the very able shoulders and department with ASEC ISA and UNIO. But of course, as okay, just a little bit, what the heck do I do besides take up space? I am Undersecretary for Civilian Security and Consular Affairs. So if you need help with passport, buy one, take one. No, just kidding. We're hard at work at the e-visa system. Okay, now, but civilian security, I like to say shorthand, it's planetary and human security, meaning, or otherwise, it's fancy way of saying, USIC for taong bahay. Hindi ako sumasama sa mga state visit or other. I work. I really work. I mean, akong pinapadala ni Secretary to, for example, Anti-Terrorism Council and DREAMC, National Intelligence Board, CAAP, and all that. I'm also a proud member of the Philippine Marine Corps Reserve and Philippine Coast Guard Auxiliary, PCG. All right. Now, but okay, so we backstop as we go deeper into, and also I more or less, Mindanao issues are also coordinated by my office. And I work closely with Bar, Minda, and so on. Okay, well, anyway, now, despite the significant gains we have made in our peace processes, especially, of course, we're very proud that we have established the BARM and its transitional authorities, challenges do remain. So we would like you, our practitioners and policymakers, to take away greater appreciation of IHL after today's discussions in view of current developments. Oh, say hi to also General Francisco of PPSC, which I had the honor of also lecturing at. Oh, of course, I'm also with I'm Vice President of the NDCP Alumni Association. Any Panday here? NDCP graduates? Well, don't forget it's our homecoming tomorrow. Don't forget, 60s attire is the dress code for the party. I'm running for re-election, so please vote for me. Don't vote for me. Bahala kayo sa buhay nyo. Now, okay, in a rapidly changing global environment with new technologies such as artificial intelligence paving the way for the introduction of highly advanced weapons that limit human intervention, the importance of IHL cannot be overstated. IHL serves as a moral compass upholding human dignity and rights in the face of new technologies that stretch the frontiers of warfare and can indiscriminately multiply human suffering. Hence, the Philippines has been adamant in the UN and other fora that human control over such weapons must always be asserted. And also, looking at this issue of killer robots and other issues in IHL is going to be part of our advocacy as we campaign for a seat in the UN Security Council from 2027 to 2028 term. So not only we are counting on you to advocate for us with your friends and colleagues, but also the larger global community that we will be the IHL candidate for the UN Security Council. Now, by bringing our experts with diverse backgrounds together, our symposium serves as a platform to exchange views and ideas, review our progress, and see where improvements can be made and how we can address emerging challenges. Now, in pushing the envelope on IHL being a Trekkie, I would love to see, so as part of our campaign to popularize awareness of IHL through Diplomatic League, and so Fred has kindly spoken to our Diplomatic League online sessions on aspects of disarmament. We're going for a MOL-UN Security Council, but also I would like to go even for being a Star Trek fan and Star Wars and science fiction. Let us also look how science fiction has looked at actually pushing the boundaries. So even sadly, what we thought, the Terminator, that is now reality with lethal autonomous weapon systems. The Terminator, the killer robot, so to speak, that's now, it's no longer fiction, it's reality. But we have to look at the future also, well, or the long time ago in the galaxy far, far away. Let us assess the Death Star, which blows up entire planets in terms of IHL. Star Trek has also introduced the idea of temporal Cold Wars, meaning using time as well. Imagine if the technology were perfected to go back in time. Assess that in terms of IHL. Okay, so, well, okay, just a bit far, galaxy far, far away, or space of final frontier. We're going back to Earth. I wish to extend our heartfelt gratitude to our guest speakers who kindly agreed to grace our event this afternoon and share their knowledge and expertise with us. So we encourage all participants to actively engage in the conversation, raise questions, and share your opinions and experiences on the topics to be presented. We have a wealth of wisdom in this crowd, and our distinguished colleagues from the armed forces have direct experience from the field that they can share. We also have, as I mentioned, of course, we have our panel here. We have also Madame Sedge Jimenez, part of our Geneva, I don't want to say mafia, but you know, okay. So who was a special UN Special Rapporteur on internally displaced persons. So we look forward to our future discussions. So my deep appreciation goes out to the organizers of the event, the IHL Ad Hoc Committee that continues to advocate for better understanding of IHL across all sectors of society. It is my fervent hope that the Ad Hoc Committee will no longer be ad hoc. My God, they're still ad hoc. I mean, I left 10 years ago. No, we should, that's something we should push forward. And I think we really need to find advocates in our legislature. So this will become, you know, with not being ad hoc and permanent, this will become a permanent feature, permanent platform, and active actor in interagency and multi-stakeholder collaboration for strengthening IHL. For those of you that know me, I have this way, because when I attend diplomatic receptions, my number one dictum is don't bore them. So how do I unbore? I sing. But now, okay, so this leads to the issue of what is so like when I was at the French reception, can you guess what song I sang? A classic song. La Vie en Rose, very good. Ah, you were there, okay. When I was at Canadian reception, I sang actually kind of an alternative national anthem based on the Molson beer commercial. I am Canadian. No, but seriously now, what song best encapsulate IHL? Well, you know, there's all these peace-related songs like Let There Be Peace on Earth, but then there is Man in the Mirror by Michael Jackson. There is Imagine by John Lennon. But I think but ultimately, what was the original name of IHL? Human Rights in Time of War, or International Love Armed Conflict. So the song again, I'm almost done, don't worry, is that we wanted to have a song contest, I believe, to have a contest that could encourage Filipinos, particularly young Filipinos, to come up with a song with lyrics that are appropriate for IHL advocacy. But, you know, Googling and my karaoke playbook, the only song that I find that comes somewhat close, aside from, you know, peace in general, is War. It was a 1970 song by Edwin Starr. It goes, war, huh? What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. War, huh? Yeah. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again. War, huh? Good God. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Listen to me, oh ho. And greetings to Senator Richard Gordon, Chairman. And maybe you can come up on stage and sing with me. Well, and Secretary Gwen Pang, welcome, ma'am. Okay. So Senator Gordon, Secretary Gwen Pang, and their IHL community. Sorry for the awful sintonado singing, but that's one of the things we should work on with Philippine Red Cross, is a contest to come up with a new song on IHL. So I was singing War from our hippie days. Okay. Anyway, so once again, warm welcome to you all. I'm confident that this symposium will be enlightening, enriching experience for everyone. Maraming salamat po, and let's have a great symposium.
Thank you very much, Yusek Domingo, for that very entertaining opening remarks for the second half of this program. I know that we have our panelists really excited, but right now we would like to acknowledge the presence of Senator Richard Gordon. And building on the spirit of celebrating IHL, let us now welcome Senator Richard J. Gordon, Chairman and CEO of the Philippine Red Cross, for his remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Yusek. I'd like to greet my good friend, Yusek Domingo, never on Sunday, but he does it every day. And I thought I was going to have to handle him with a Heimlich maneuver. I'm not sure choking. But anyway, I'm very happy to be here, and I'd like to greet all the VIPs here, as well as all the common tao like me. Asek Lilian de Leon, are you here? Oh, sort of worries me about. And of course, Coast Guard Commodore Mitzi Stilo Campo. We're very busy in the West Philippine Sea, huh? Thank you. And of course, Lieutenant Colonel Jerson Paglinawan. There you go. Thank you. Assistant Secretary Maria Teresa Almuela, who was my seatmate. Danny Murhi, ICRC Philippines. Where's Danny? Oh, I thought you were General Bato de la Rosa. I told you, you should wear a mustache so that you can distinguish yourself. You know, the principle of distinction. Let me also greet Senior Undersecretary Elena Espinosa. Is he here? Oh, he left. When I arrived, he left. Of course, Severo Catura, I already greeted him earlier. And of course, Deputy Assistant Secretary Jesus Enrique Garcia. Hi, how are you? You're not related to Evan, are you? Are you the son of Evan already? Your boss? Akala ko, anak ka na niya Evan eh. Anyway, all the distinguished panelists, my fellow citizens, magandang tanghali po sa or hapon sa inyong lahat. Apologies are needed. I came all the way from traffic-infested Manila, from Quezon City, deep down near the Batasan, Pambasa, where laws are made, but laws are never enforced, especially on traffic. And it was really such a battle, just as it is a battle insofar as international humanitarian law is concerned. You know, we have a law. In fact, we are a super country in the sense that we have two humanitarian laws made here. Well, you know, Miriam Defensor, God bless her soul, was kind of sickly at the time, and she didn't have time to sponsor and ratify and have us ratify the international convention. And so we were left hanging. So I decided to take matters into my own hands, and I sponsored the international humanitarian law, domestic law. And so now we have this distinction of having two laws. Of course, one domestic and one international, and they can, my memory serves correct, they may be persecuted under those two different laws. In fact, some very well-known personalities in this country can be persecuted. You know, those who engage in wanton killing and all that. I mean, you can't get them from ICC. You can get them from international humanitarian law violations, because we just said that in Marawi. You know, there were violations on both sides. But nonetheless, I would like to challenge. You know, every year they invite me, and I don't know what to say anymore. I ran out of topics. But why don't I call your attention to the fact that remember the Holocaust? How many? 6 million. Remember Rwanda? 500,000. Remember the Balkans? So many hundreds of thousands of people killed. Raped, murdered, kidnapped, you know, displaced. You know, they say man learns from his mistakes. That's why God never learns. You know, mukhang hindi na ko yung joke ko. Anyway, we haven't seemed to learn from the experience of history. And right now, as I speak, you have about 45 countries in Africa, and a number of countries in the Middle East, Israel, you know, Syria, Iran, Iraq, you name it. We have international law violations. So there seems to be impunity. So why make a law in the first place? Why make a law when we're just going to pay lip service to it? Are we just observers? Are we just outsiders in this world? I'm with the Red Cross, and I've always challenged ICRC. What were you doing in the war, Daddy? When Mr. Hitler was doing all those stupid things. For that matter, you may ask President Roosevelt, the late President Roosevelt, why America slept while all these people were being killed, you know, in Europe. And what are we doing now? As we see all kinds of things are happening. There's bombings in Syria. There are situations occurring in other parts of the world, including the Philippines, including Myanmar. You know, I can kick myself because I went to Myanmar at the request of ICRC and IFRC, and I met with Aung San Suu Kyi. And we were trying to tell her to be more active in terms of the Rohingya. And now she's the one jailed. And I kind of have a lot of sympathy for her, because sa Tagalog, kaya natin siyang parusahan eh. Kasi I think ang accusation sa kanya is she more or less coalesced with the powers that be in Myanmar and did not say a word about the Rohingya anymore. My goodness, it's just like being in the Philippines when you have a president like in the recent past, where everybody just kept quiet while we were being stolen blind, or where people were being killed. We have extrajudicial killings, or for that matter, everybody kept quiet. This is not a war, but practically a war when you have motorcycle killings happening all over the country. And some of them perpetrated by combatants. No? And so, to my mind, are we sleeping on the job? We're all partners here. Isn't it about time that perhaps we must have a dialogue with the ICRC, with the IFRC, governments? Maybe we can have a dialogue. I think the ICRC had a dialogue on what happened during the time of Mr. Hitler recently in 2022. And there was an article I was reading this morning, kind of interesting, that he's a director of international law. And he was saying that ICRC failed bluntly because, they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They want access to Germany. And, I said, if I were in charge, I would have suspended the German Red Cross, because in this article, he was saying, hey, German Red Cross was cooperating with her Hitler at the time. And yet, we were happy just to go into Germany, into Theresienstadt, to be able to see what was really happening. And they gave out something like a Potemkin village, you will recall, in Russia, when Catherine the Great and the Tsars would have people, when the Tsar would visit along the trains, and they would have, I saw that in Maguindanao. They had villages that seemed to be peaceful, but in reality, inside, just like the Bible says, whitened sepulchres outside, but inside filled with dead man's bones. So it's important for us to tarry a little and talk to ourselves, and to really say, are we just going to say lip service? Because it would seem we never learn. They even did a movie on Rwanda. They had, what was that latest movie? Diamond, about, Blood Diamond. And I'm sorry, I'm getting advanced in years. No? And I just turned 78. But some of you look older than me. I'm not worried about my age. And that's why I don't age, because I'd like to keep my idealism intact. You have to speak out. You have to take a position. Why are we having this? Celebrating? What are we celebrating? Can we take account? How many millions have been killed? And yet we celebrate international humanitarian law. How many protocols have we had in the ICRC? ICRC is one of the greatest inventions of mankind. There are rules in war. Okay? But when all these rules are being violated by both sides, I think it's about time that we say somebody has got to step into the plate. The rules-based order say that nobody can no longer attack a sovereign nation. And that's why they created the United Nations. Bawal lang umatake na sovereign nation, di ba, Mr. Secretary? And yet, you have Mr. Putin, who is my candidate for international humanitarian law violation. And I'm not worried about my saying so, because I believe so. When you take children and take them to another country, isn't that a blatant violation? Where is the United Nations? Where is the Philippines? Where is us? Where's the UP Law Center? So if you allow impunity to happen, as it is happening throughout the entire world, where racism is rearing its ugly head everywhere in the world, in America, racism is right there. Somebody got convicted of killing people in a synagogue. About 11 people were killed by a truck driver. When you keep on allowing these things to happen without so much as a statement, or, words don't have any purchase whatsoever. You can have all the strong words you want to say, as I'm doing right now, but they don't mean anything. Never going to happen. But perhaps it's time that annually, perhaps there should be a review. Amnesty International keeps coming out with all the violations, but all the responsible countries of the world should really come out with a review of and grade all countries of the world, irrespective of whether they are. In fact, in that report made by that ICRC gentleman, his name is Francois Bunion, if I'm not mistaken. Do you know him, General Bato? Do you know him? Okay, right. So I called you General Bato, so they will not know who you are. But anyway, he said that the ICRC failed, and in fact, they failed. You know why? Because the Swiss government was against the appeal that they were going to make. There's going to be an appeal where they say, hey, all these crimes of bombings, all these crimes of violating international humanitarian law, Well, in reality, they were afraid that the sponsor of the ICRC, which was the Geneva, would say something. And that's why after the war, they made a review. And they're no longer drawing from the Geneva experience. So we can learn from all these experiences. I came here, I woke up early this morning to think about what I was going to say here, because what else can I say? I can talk till I'm blue in the face, but if there is no response from the world, what are we here for? What are we celebrating? It's just like Happy Valentine. But in the Happy Valentine, the song goes, each day must be Valentine's Day. Each day must be International Humanitarian Law Day. And our soldiers must assert that. Because if there is no discipline among our soldiers and they allow these violations, then they lose the moral authority. That's why, to a certain extent, the church, ICRC, all good people lost some sense of moral authority when they just made a little peep about what was happening in Europe at the time. Or for that matter, Rwanda. Or for that matter, Kosovo. We do it in movies. There was a movie, one of my favorites, it's an action movie called The Peacekeeper, when a guy whose daughter and his wife was killed, he came out and created a bomb and bought it out of the old Soviet Union, and he was going to bomb New York. And he made a TV and said, I'm a Croat, I'm a Slovak, I'm a human man. Well, I thought that was a great message to say. And yet, he was going to kill the United Nations at the time. That was a strong message. But I think the message did not come through because it was just the movies. So I would like to end here. And maybe, I don't know if there's a discussion, but we should be talking about this. And beyond talk, beyond statements, it's just like our claim in the West Philippine Sea. Cannot just talk. I made a statement with my classmate, Tony Carpio, yesterday, and I said we must not keep quiet. And yet, that's how it starts. First, they take a little island, and then they put up their ships. They run roughshod over our fishermen, and we say, oh no, and then the president says, oh, I'm just joking, don't mind my statement. As if that. It's the same thing all over. When Hitler started coming out with the Nuremberg laws, that was already a signal that international humanitarian law was going to be violated, the race laws. And yet, everybody attended the Olympics. It was the coming out party of Nazi Germany at that time. So we're all complicit, aren't we? And so this would-be judge of international humanitarian law says we're all guilty. Thank you all very much, and good afternoon to all of you.
All right. Thank you once again, Senator Gordon, for that inspiring speech and a call to message for everyone here. Definitely gives us something to think about. Now it's time for us to move on to the much awaited part of our event today. Ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed panelists who are joining me this afternoon, once again, good afternoon. So it is my privilege to call to order this symposium with the theme of IHL in the Philippines, Different Perspectives. And I'm truly honored to be your moderator for this afternoon, and I'm sure will be a very engaging symposium. So this afternoon, as you could see from the people on my left, we have gathered some of the more distinguished names on the field of IHL to share their unique insights and expertise on the topic. As we look at their panelists, we can definitely see that they're going to come in and bring in a diverse perspective. So they're going to be talking about IHL from different vantage points. So through their different perspectives, we do hope to arrive at a much deeper understanding of the nuances and the multifaceted nature of IHL in the country. So without further ado, we've already discussed the flow of the program with our panelists. So again, each speaker would have 10 minutes to speak. And afterwards, we're going to be opening the floor for your questions for an open forum. So we do hope that you're also going to be engaging with us and the panelists here. So with that, let us now begin and approach this symposium with open hearts and minds and embrace the diversity of ideas. So to start off with our first speaker, he comes from a unique background of being not only as an accomplished medical doctor, but also a renowned lawyer. Attorney Daniel Lising completed his Juris Doctor degree from the University of the Philippines and his Masters of Laws in Global Health Law from the prestigious Georgetown University Law Center. He has had over a decade of experience as a faculty for numerous law schools in the country, while further building his IHL expertise as a peer reviewer for the Journal of Southeast Asian Human Rights. Mr. Lising continues to share his knowledge through publications such as the Perspectives on Terrorism in the Philippine Context, published by the UP Law Center, and the Update on the Rule of Law for Human Rights in ASEAN, The Path to Integration, June 2016, published by the Human Rights Resource Center. And to give us a lecture on legal perspectives on IHL in the Philippines, we are pleased to have with us today Attorney Daniel Lising of the UP Human Rights Center. A round of applause, please.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Senator Gordon, USEC Jesus Domingo, and ASEC Maria Teresa Almojeda, distinguished guests. Thank you and good afternoon. Given that I only have 10 minutes, I will go straight to the point. The Philippines has long been a supporter of international humanitarian law. Now, traditionally, international humanitarian law is thought of under the Geneva Conventions, the 4 Geneva Conventions, and the additional protocols that was passed regarding the Geneva Conventions. Now, however, protection of civilians already existing as early as 1899 in the Hague Regulations and in 1907. Now, even prior to the Philippines' accession to the Geneva Convention in 1952, the Philippine state, through the judiciary, has already found that the Philippines is respecting international humanitarian law. And this is through the cases that was decided by the Philippine Supreme Court in the case of Yamashita versus Tyre, wherein the Tiger of Malaya, General Yamashita, was charged before the Philippine Supreme Court for 144 acts of violation of, well, basically, war crimes was not yet a term then, but basically the articles of war. In this particular case, General Yamashita was using the defense of legality. The defense of legality basically says that since there is no law in the Philippines that basically criminalizes violations of the articles of war, then he could not be found or convicted under Philippine law. Unfortunately, the Philippine Supreme Court actually found that the articles of war, well, not actually the articles of war, but the Geneva Conventions or the principles of Geneva Convention and the Hague Regulation already form part of the generally accepted principles of international law. And that's why even before we have acceded to the Geneva Conventions, the Philippine Supreme Court is already implementing IHL rules in the country. This was again reiterated in the case of Kuroda versus Halandoni, another case against a general that was put forth before the Supreme Court. And similarly, the defense of legality was against race, and again, the Supreme Court reiterated that generally accepted principles of international law accepted that the principles of the Hague Regulation was part of generally accepted principles of international law. Now, the Philippines acceded to the convention in 1952 with additional protocols 1 and 2 in 1972, and I believe protocol 3 in 2005, and up to protocol 5 most recently. Now, because the Philippine Constitution says that international law forms part of the law of the land, the Philippine legal system actually punishes violations of international humanitarian law. But there is a problem. And the problem there is, if you were to prosecute someone under IHL violations, what is the penalty? Because that is a criminal offense and no penal sanction is attached to the Geneva Conventions. And in fact, that is one of the biggest problems that prosecutions would entail. We can find you guilty, but after that, is that merely an acceptance of guilt without punishment? Because the Constitution also has a provision in Article 3, which has the Bill of Rights. And no ex post facto law can be made to apply. No retroactive law can be made, especially criminal law. Bawal yun. Now, actually, there are other problems there like jurisdiction and then the like, but this was addressed when in 2009, December 11, as our good senator has earlier stated, the Philippines enacted into law Republic Act 9851, our IHL law. And in that particular law, it clarified the problems of jurisdiction. It said that genocide and other war crimes are of universal jurisdiction. And it addressed the bigger problem. What? What is the proper penalty for violations of this particular law? And because one of the problems there, again, is they also gave definitions. What definition should be made to apply? What genocide definition was used? And what willful killing and common Article 3 definitions were made to apply? All of those is now codified under 9851. And for that, we are eternally grateful to the legislature for clarifying this and making us more responsive to this particular nuanced problem. I mean, every time that you have problems of this nature, people would think that, well, this is a lawyer's problem. But that's not a lawyer's problem. It's everyone's problem. Anybody, remember that international humanitarian law applies whenever you go into international and non-international armed conflict. So when there is an armed conflict, these rules apply to you. And speaking with our colleagues from the armed forces, these rules may be made to apply to you if you intentionally or unintentionally engage in its basically violate these laws, no? And that's a big problem. You have to know. Because one of the things about IHL laws versus human rights laws is you have to look at what is present to know which legal regime will apply. Whenever there is an armed conflict, that's the time IHL applies. But what about there is no armed conflict? Well, the human rights rules apply. So therefore, now you know na if there is no armed conflict, you have to go to normal police operations. Human rights applies. Because remember, under IHL rules, it protects non-combatants and protected persons. So what does that mean? Well, if you are a combatant, even if you're not in an active theater of operations, you are validly a target, but not under human rights rules. Human rights rules, you have to go through the usual due process and all the rest of the requirements under the Article 3 or in the Bill of Rights. Now, a further showing of how much the Philippine state respects IHL is its passage of RA 10530, which defined the use and protection of the Red Crescent, Red Cross, and the Red Crystal symbols. They told us through this particular law who are allowed to use these symbols, which was because there is a situation where sometimes these symbols are used to hide behind. And that's not a good thing because it dilutes the importance of those symbols. It also criminalizes its misuse and makes penalties for its misuse. RA 11188 is the special protection of children in situations of armed conflict. Now, we all know that children are unique in that they're not really active combatants, and their use as combatants is actually prohibited under international law. Now, This particular law also codifies the commitment of the Philippine government to the protection of children in situations of armed conflict. And lastly, the last law that I think I have time to discuss is the RA 11479, or the anti-terrorism law. Now, there's been a lot of criticism about this law, but it has a provision. Section 13 of that provision provides a humanitarian exemption, specifically for the ICRC, which basically says that if you are giving treatment to combatants or deemed terrorists, you are not considered as providing material support, and therefore you will not be prosecuted under the anti-terrorism law. Now, well, seeing that I have used up my time, I will address all other questions in the open forum. Thank you for listening.
All right. So thank you, Attorney Liseng, for talking about the long history of the Philippines in terms of supporting international humanitarian law. And I do think that hearing this legal perspective is really important in understanding how certain laws help further the respect for IHL, but at the same time provided additional protections for the most vulnerable, such as what you've mentioned, children in armed conflict. Thank you for that. Now for our second speaker, Mr. Alfredo Fred Lubang has been working on IHL issues for almost 3 decades now. It's been a while, sir. From landmines and small arms to nuclear weapons and killer robots. He is the regional representative of Nonviolence International Southeast Asia and the national coordinator of the Philippine campaign to ban landmines, one of the civil society active observers in the IHL ad hoc committee, where most of us are part of currently. He was also awarded the 2022 Sean McBride Peace Award for his unflagging work and commitment to humanitarian disarmament. Now, to provide us with a lecture on civil society perspectives on IHL in the Philippines, may we all welcome Mr. Alfredo Fred Lubang to the stage.
Thank you, Mark. Honorable guests, participants, distinguished. It's been an honor always to be invited to this annual event, and it's like a reunion of IHL supporters every year. So good afternoon, Assalamu alaikum. I'll go directly to these points, given that we have at least limited 10 minutes. So my first point on at least how civil society we see IHL, not just in the Philippines, but globally. It's also about people. And I think I remember Yusek Gary in our last regional workshop on weapons regulation. You mentioned about not just a humanitarian work, but the humanitarian herself or himself. And I'm really glad to see over time, at least for the past 3 decades, those people who are very consistent. No? We are now at the time of leadership in the Department of Foreign Affairs, that Secretary Manalo with, I don't know if retired Ambassador Ivan Garcia is here, Ambassador Isa, of course, Yusek Gary, down, no? They are now in the leadership of the Department of Foreign Affairs, but these are disarmament people. I was with Gary during the negotiations of the Cluster Munition Convention, with Secretary Manalo in other disarmament platforms, and with Ambassador Isa last year for the approval of the declaration on explosive weapons in populated areas. I'm mentioning this because it's really about also people. I've been a part of the National IHL Ad Hoc Committee, and I could see the dedication of those people working from various agencies in government, and they're here this afternoon. And these are really hardworking people who have kept this IHL advocacy over the years. And this is not just, I think, in our time. Rizal, our national hero, wrote in his novel El Filibusterismo, one chapter there deals with explosive weapons on populated areas. Kung babasahin nyo, one of the last chapters, the use of explosive weapons, hudyat ng revolusyon, no? It was supposed to explode in that kind of gathering in one of the chapters in El Filibusterismo. But it's interesting how that issue also has been tackled, and understanding why explosive weapons is still being used to this day. My second point is really more of realizing that there is this varied different views, even from civil society. And thank you, Senator Gordon. You have brought the elephant in the room. You know? With all the Ukraine war happening, with all the conflicts in our neighbors. We were just talking of Myanmar. Manipur is burning currently. Killings in Manipur, and no one could even intervene. South Thailand and many parts of the world, no? Syria. And we're looking at it from a perspective of civil society, where there is this group that's really anti-war, not going to establish the conditions before going to war. Legal minds would call it jus ad bellum, but these are the conditions that would allow states to go into war. And one of them is really aggression. But if you look at these conditions, we could actually prevent it, prevent going to war. But when it's already during war, our work from a humanitarian perspective we are trying to address these particular weapons that would have greater impact on people. And not just people, but on the environment and on other beings. And thank you for the Philippines leadership along this line. And we are quite proud that the civil society perspectives are actually aligned with all the ratifications that the Department of Foreign Affairs have supported, the Department of National Defense, and all branches of the armed forces have supported the ratifications of several of these humanitarian disarmament. And the last one, Attorney Hazel reminded me, we really thank you, Senator, for the ratification of the Arms Trade Treaty last year. Although we were online, we participated in the debates, but it was really good to see in the time of pandemic, Philippines showed some light to the world of a very bleak pandemic and the wars, that indeed humanitarian disarmament is something. It's the path towards peace, and we like to see that. My colleague Judge Soliman Santos Jr., who actually was really helpful in the drafting of the national IHL bill, always says that following the rules of war is a path to peace. This point of view is quite generally accepted now. And we're glad to see that this commemoration of this IHL event is aligned on that. When we looked at aspects of just not about controlling weapons, we always stress that it's not just the two parties that's affected. It's also the entire communities that's displaced. And going back to people, our colleague, former Special Rapporteur on Indigenous Displaced Persons, Attorney Sad Jimenez is here, that is actually interlinked. IHL is very linked with human rights. Every displaced persons would ask, it's a cycle of bakwit, in the Philippine context. Displaced every time there's conflict between these two parties. And what could they do? We have now a pending national bill in Congress on the IDPs, and we encourage our legislators do pass it, as we encourage everyone that indeed human rights and IHL links are really inseparable. It's not just going into armed conflict. A military officer or a military sargento just sending his child to school, not in times of war or battle, sending his kindergarten child to a school, would he be subjected to ambush or killed? Or just a combatant, for example, let's just say again, another elephant in the room, the New People's Army member taking a bath in a river or washing his family's clothes, would he be subjected to violence? So these are really going down to the details of moral issues. And this is what we would like to bring in some suggestions, given that we are in the theme of different perspectives. Can we suggest that both sides make a stronger effort, not just to follow IHL, but human rights? The main idea here is who does the better job of following these rules gets the support and winning that it deserves, even morally. This way of thinking says that winning a war doesn't depend on military means or military victory. It's also the moral strength of our combatants. I know so many families who are also in the military sector might challenge this, that it's difficult when you're in the midst of battle. We also call on both sides to admit of the human rights and IHL violations. We've been following the case of the Absalon case of the Masbate use of landmines, which killed a athlete, Keith Absalon, and his cousin. It's been years, no? The Communist Party of the Philippines, the People's Army, admitted that they did it. No? But what now? Where do we go from there? We could just hear news that the Australian Defense Forces charged their own officers of IHL violations in Afghanistan, killing 39 innocent civilians. So, as part of that, we would like to, again, can we go towards that direction where we would really admit, and not just admit, but persecute our own. Since both sides, the second point is, since both sides are spreading also some biased propaganda, and we all know, we are aware of that, and distorts the truth, there's an urgent need to set up organizations, independent organizations that could monitor and verify these HR and IHL violations. We have, of course, the Commission on Human Rights, but there are also groups like us. We've offered, we have an MOU with the Commission on Human Rights, Philippine Campaign to Ban Landmines would like to assist both parties to verify and monitor and have the capacity to really establish the truth of IHL violations, particularly dealing with explosive weapons used in battlegrounds. Oh, there's another elephant in the room. The existing threats, and again, Senator Gordon have mentioned this. Before we go into the war, the threats of being into war, we might be drawn into, of course, the West Philippine Sea issues, but also Taiwan issues. And so the continuous threats of war remains. And we don't want to rattle all sides to be on an arms race. We all know the tragic history days ago, commemoration of the Nagasaki and Hiroshima bombings. I think some of you have watched Oppenheimer. We don't need this Hollywood to remind us the tragedy of the use of particular weapons in society. And so I go back to, I really want to encourage everyone, let's try to change not just our laws, but because I hope IHL does not develop in the future. If we end wars, we don't need IHL. IHL should stop at some point, because at the end of the day, if wars end, we work towards the ending of armed conflicts. We really don't need these rules. The world is being set in a kind of mindset that power is still defined by what kind of weapons do we have. From maybe at the time of swords and arrows to now nuclear weapons and even killer robots, that we are glad to see Philippines showing leadership on a new protocol, Protocol 6 of the CCW, Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons, on lethal autonomous weapon systems. These are the use of artificial intelligence, the weaponization of this capacity. If we shift that kind of thinking, that power, global power, or our own wealth as a nation is not really dependent on what weapons we have, but on a humanitarian ideals and aspiration, we would be on the right direction. So we fully support the expression of the Department of Foreign Affairs that humanitarian disarmament would be a central piece in our candidacy for the UN Security Council. So we really would work towards that, and hopefully Philippines leadership would again showcase that we have some options to make this world better. Maraming salamat po. Mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you, Mr. Fred Lubang. You got us all hooked as you surveyed the broader view of different civil society perspectives in an effort to create sort of this enabling environment towards a just and sustainable peace. For our next panelist, it is my honor to introduce Attorney Hazel Hovis, a remarkable legal professional whose demonstrated education and experience enabled her to blaze a path of excellence in the field of IHL. Attorney Hovis' notable career includes serving as the deputy to the Special Envoy of Transnational Crime, thereby contributing to the field of transnational crime prevention and security. Now, in recognition of her commitment and her tireless efforts in promoting IHL in various fora, it is with deep respect that we welcome Attorney Hazel. Before we continue, maybe remind our speakers to please keep the 10-minute time period so we can have room for questions later on. Thank you.
Good afternoon to Senator Richard Gordon, USEC Gary Domingo, and ASEC Maria Teresa Almuela, and to the members of the IHL Ad Hoc Committee and our distinguished guests. Thank you for inviting the Office of the Special Envoy on Transnational Crime, headed by Special Envoy Anthony Alcantara, to present and to share some of the good practices and lessons learned in the implementation of IHL. When Republic Act 1951, or the IHL Act, became enacted into law in December of 2009, it has already ensured that it will be mainstreamed. The challenge then for the government is to how to effectively implement the law. Of course, awareness and familiarity with the law is a challenge, but the bigger challenge is to ensure that the policies, protocols, and systems are in place to make the law effective. Examining our experience, the OSCE being the National Policy Coordinator of the push for the ratification of the Arms Trade Treaty, will help us learn some good practices and some lessons learned, which might be used or improved upon in our future endeavors. As a refresher, the Arms Trade Treaty, or ATT, is considered as an international humanitarian law because it sets common international standards for the transfer of conventional arms and ammunition with the express purpose of reducing human suffering. The Philippines signed the ATT in September 25, 2013, and eventually ratified the treaty and submitted the same to the UN in March 24, 2022. And as Fred mentioned earlier, we thank Senator Gordon for supporting the ratification of the act, because if there was one less vote, then it would not have been ratified. So thank you to the Senate at that time. And within those 8 intervening laws, between the really Senator, we were cheering online. And within those 8 intervening years, between the signing and the ratification, was a whole of nation approach to ensure that the Philippines is ready to implement the treaty. So we were not just waiting for the Senate to ratify, but we were readying the government agencies and the industry that would be affected by the treaty. Our experience during that time, from our experience, I could cite some at least 5 good practices in our implementation of IHL with respect to the ATT in the Philippines. The first one I would like to highlight is it has already been mentioned that the commitment of the Philippine leadership to IHL and ensuring that there is an end to violence and in addressing the weapons used in armed conflict. Mentioned earlier, there were other instruments that were recently ratified by the Philippines. Among those were the Convention prohibiting certain conventional weapons, Convention on cluster munitions, and the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. During that last Senate, and focusing on the ATT with the leadership of the Department of Foreign Affairs. The OSCE, together with the DTI Strategic Trade Management Office, the PNP Firearms and Explosives Office, and other government agencies actively participated in the committee hearings and the technical working groups to ensure that the government's position is clear, that we have already the means to implement it. Which leads to the second point, that we use the whole of government approach to encourage implementation of ATT. OSCE co-implemented a 15-day training on institutional capacity building together with Nonviolence International, Southeast Asia, in which we availed of the ATT Voluntary Trust Fund facility. The 15-day training resulted to 17 relevant frontline agencies and trained 29 personnel in the obligations and implications of being a state party to the ATT, which includes the observance of IHL. The participants were trained, but in that training, they also share their own expertise on how ATT can be effectively implemented given their agencies' respective mandates. In choosing who to train, the OSCE sent official invitations to the implementing agencies to identify these representatives who will be able to share expertise on conventional weapons licensing, investigation, and enforcement, to form part of the technical working group, and an interagency body which includes representatives from the civil society. Some of these agencies are the Philippine Center on Transnational Crime, some came from the DFA, as I mentioned before, STMO, FEO, the Department of National Defense Legal Affairs, the AFP, the Philippine Navy, the Department of Justice, the ILG, as I said, 17 agencies. These core advocates for the ATT eventually contributed to how position papers of their offices were formed and were submitted to the DFA so that it could feed into the ratification process. And with the main law which will implement the ATT, which is the Strategic Trade Management Act, which has been previously passed, we were able to ensure that the IHL provisions, especially risk assessment criteria for imports and exports of strategic goods, end use and end user checks are explained well, and that these are already being practiced. Thirdly, aside from that 15-day training, there were still continuous capacity building activities that were conducted, and there is sharing of, that was 8 years. So there's continuous capacity building activities, sharing of best practices, and identification of common challenges among participants. And one of those identified common challenge is the need to stop diversion and pilferage of SALWs, or the small arms and light weapons. Hence, the need for assessment and review of our Philippine national technical regulations, norms, standards, and current practices related to physical security and stockpile management, or PSSM, of SALWs, to make sure that arms do not fall in the wrong hands. And Speaking of those common challenges, we must emphasize that there are several instruments to which the Philippine government is bound, but there is a recognition from among these government agencies that these instruments are interconnected and must be taken together in the implementation. For arms control, aside from the ATT, we also have to consider the UN Program of Action on SALWs, the International Tracing Instrument, and the Firearms Protocol, which I know that Yusek Gary forgot to remind us that we have not yet signed and ratified. But we are following because we already considering it because we have already ratified the UN Convention against Transnational Organized Crime, which in which it is a protocol 2, which jumps on to the fourth point, which is that that having an arms control framework, looking at it as an integrated and interconnected work of the different agencies, that contributes to the overall goal of reducing illicit arms. We have drafted and are in the process of updating our National Action Plan on SALWs, which elaborates our national priorities and facilitates coordination between national government agencies and key stakeholders. And the same NAP would also be a reference material for external partners and donors for exploring possible programs, projects, or activities for partnerships. This is led by OSETC, but the technical working group behind it is also the core, which helped us to push for the ratification of the ATT. Lastly, because I said 5, our partnership with civil society is key to our work. The OSETC, as the national focal point for policy coordination of the ATT, took the lead in initiating activities to build the capacities of concerned government agencies and its personnel. And in this way, we engaged with the civil society, who not only Nonviolence International, ICRC, who not only engaged with us by sharing their expertise, but also gave their constructive assessments and recommendations to help us find solutions to these common challenges. And even now, we still continue to engage with them because ratification is not the end goal. We have to submit the reports, and we have to make sure that our laws, policies are in line. So to recap, our work, our experience needs commitment of the leadership, to enforce IHL, the whole of government approach is needed, continuous capacity building efforts, because although the agency is there, but sometimes people change, and we need to regularly conduct orientation and information campaigns, and the appreciation that controlling the flow of illicit firearms, and not controlling, making sure that illicit firearms do not go to illicit hands, should be looked at as an integrated and interconnected work by the agencies. And lastly, but not the least, partnership with civil society, which makes for a whole of society approach. Daghang salamat and mabuhay to all us IHL athletes.
All right. Thank you, Attorney Hobbes, for that clear explanation on good practices that we should continue on, such as the whole of government approach and implementing key treaties such as the ATT and the IHL. Now, last but not the least, we are pleased to call on Ms. Sahar Harun. So Ms. Sahar Haroon joined the International Committee of the Red Cross in 2017 and is currently the regional legal advisor for Southeast Asia and Japan. Previously, she was a legal advisor with the ICRC's delegation in Islamabad. And Sahar has also worked as a legal advisor at the ICRC headquarters in Geneva, covering the Near and Middle East. Prior to joining the ICRC, Sahar received formal education from Pakistan and worked with an international law think tank while simultaneously consulting for the ICRC since 2016. And since August 2020, she is also one of the 2 managing editors for the Asia Pacific Journal of IHL and has written various articles for journals on pertinent issues of IHL, including on cyber warfare and protection of healthcare and the medical mission. So Ms. Sahar, the floor is yours.
Dear colleagues, good afternoon. It's not morning. I've lost all sense of time now. Thank you so much for having me. As someone who's only been to the Philippines twice, I have to say that it was my absolutely immense pleasure to have been here both times on an occasion where we are among friends and colleagues who are all about commemorating the importance of international humanitarian law, and to be among friends who do not need to be convinced about this importance, but rather are committed to working towards strengthening international humanitarian law. And it is my pleasure to be here side by side with you. This body of law, which is at many times literally the only thing that stands between human beings and the horrors of armed conflict that they face on the ground, and a body of law that already within itself provides those pathways that could lead towards peace, such as negotiating peace deals between parties to an armed conflict, or providing for broadest possible amnesties for fighters and combatants. So saying that, if I may say, Yusek Domingo, how you started earlier, I found that to be very inspiring. And when you were talking about a song that will be an IHL song, I am that generation that the first thing that came to my mind was Michael Jackson's Heal the World. And since then, that's the only thing that I can think about. And I've basically forgotten everything that I wanted to say. So which is why I'm also killing this 10 minutes that I have. But what I will not do is sing it for you, because I think we still want people in the room when we come to the discussion. So I won't take a lot of your time and mark my 10 minutes start now. I will speak a little bit about IHL and emerging technologies, having heard from the real experts before me on conventional weapons of warfare. Let's speak a little bit about a couple of issues that the ICRC is currently working on alongside states, who are, of course, the ones responsible for the evolution and development of the law. So in that, if you move to the next slide, I'm sorry, I have a presentation because what I want to say is a bit of a mouthful, and I would like to stay focused on what I want to say. So a few things that I would want to speak about is, number one, of course, to recall for everybody that IHL does apply to what we call new technologies of warfare or emerging technologies or new means and methods or weapons of warfare. However you refer to it, IHL does apply to that. And there is a growing agreement with this understanding. Then 2 issues that I want to highlight for you are in relation to autonomous weapon systems, the humanitarian consequences of these weapons, and what the ICRC proposes states to do. And a second issue that I want to highlight is the humanitarian consequences of when cyber operations are conducted against medical missions and humanitarian organizations, and then an ICRC's proposal also in that sense. You may ask me, why is this discussion happening here when what we want to talk about is IHL from a Philippines perspective? But of course, as Fred was saying before me, when it comes to autonomous weapon systems, the Philippines is really leading some of those discussions. And on the second issue, it is really our hope that states will see the importance of this topic of the grave humanitarian concerns and issues that arise when medical facilities and humanitarian organizations are targeted also in the cyberspace, and the need to then address those issues. So moving on, just to quickly recall that yes, IHL does apply to new technologies of warfare. And this is not me saying it because IHL is my bread and butter, but those who matter have said it, including when states agreed to the first additional protocol, where they said that there is a need to legally review new means and methods of warfare in their development, in their study, in their research, to ensure that they are compliant with existing international humanitarian law. And of course, then you also have the advisory opinion of the International Court of Justice from the nuclear weapons advisory case, where it says that these rules of international law, international humanitarian law, are applicable to all forms of warfare and all kinds of weapons, including those of the future. So let's turn to those two issues of the future, and maybe not so much of the future, but issues that are here today and that we are faced with today as well. The first one, autonomous weapon systems. And I'm just trying to skip through all of this because I do want to get to the discussion as quickly as possible before Mark pulls me off the podium. So what are autonomous weapon systems? I think the main point here to remember is that these are weapon systems that select and apply force, and we mean force in terms of IHL, to targets without human intervention. And as you can imagine, this causes grave concerns, both from three perspectives: humanitarian, ethical, and legal. When you're talking about humanitarian, what do you mean? Imagine when a machine is targeting humans without being able to fully assess the changing nature of the battlefield, and then targeting without distinction, for instance, or without respect to proportionality, for instance. Ethical concerns are, of course, again, where there is disregard for human dignity, because now life and death decisions are being taken by machines. And then, of course, when you talk about all of this, you can imagine that there are a lot of challenges that arise in this regard in relation to conduct of hostilities principles that have been mentioned many a times before me, such as distinction, proportionality, precautions, etc. So what does the ICRC recommend states to do? Again, I won't go into all of this detail, and I'm happy to explain some of these technical terminology in the discussion later. But just to say, for us, we classify autonomous weapon systems in three, if I may say so, broad categories. One being unpredictable autonomous weapon systems. These are those that cannot be targeted against military objectives per se, because it is not possible to understand how they choose and deploy the target. And then second, anti-personnel autonomous weapons, those that are used to target human beings. On this, the ICRC's recommendation to states is to prohibit them because of the challenges that I just mentioned. And on all other kinds of autonomous weapons that are beyond the scope, where it is still challenging, there is need to regulate those weapons through a combination of the things mentioned in on that side. So on limits on the types of target, on limits on duration and how they will be used and where they will be used and against whom they will be used, and that there will be human intervention possible. So that is on autonomous weapon systems. The second issue that I wanted to highlight is on cyber operations against medical facilities and humanitarian organizations. As you very well know this better than I do, for the last 160 years, the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, and much more recently, the Red Crystal have really been the symbols of hope. They've really been those symbols that are signal the protection of these medical facilities and humanitarian organizations. However, what we also see is that this is not always respected. And this is a problem both in the physical world, but also in the digital world. And what I mean by this being a problem in the digital world is something that we're increasingly seeing as well, where the data or the softwares or the programs of medical facilities as well as humanitarian organizations are targeted through cyber means or cyber operations. This, of course, has grave humanitarian concerns and consequences for the populations who need medical services in times of armed conflict. So you can imagine if a hospital becomes dysfunctional because its software has been hacked and no longer function, that means that everybody who is going to benefit from that medical facility no longer has that option. And this includes when this happens in times of armed conflicts. So the ICRC's proposal is on creating a signal which we are calling the digital emblem, which is more or less a replica of what you see in the physical world. So an emblem or a signal that signifies the protection of medical facilities and humanitarian organizations, so that all who lead or plan these attacks already know that this is a protected object, also in the cyberspace. Moving on. And this is not something that we are crafting as something entirely new. The basis for this is already there in international humanitarian law, but of course it needs clarification on the technological and also the legal aspects of what such a digital emblem could look like and how it would be implemented. Again, I won't go into all of this, mostly because I'm a lawyer and not a technical expert, but also because, again, to save time for the discussion later. But these are some of the solutions, technical solutions that not the ICRC, but experts that we sat with came up with to say that it is possible to have a digital emblem of sorts when you add specific letters to the IP address of programs so that it signals that this is a protected object. It is also possible to add this into its web address so that this becomes a protected object, or to add a level of certification so that whenever you access that software or that website or that program, it basically shows you that this is a protected data or object. So these are the solutions, and currently we're in the phase of technical research and consultations also with states on what these solutions are and whether these work and how these would be incorporated into existing IHL. And we hope that at the next international conference of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement in October 2024, this is a proposal that we can also submit to states concerned and have further discussions on this. So I will stop here with deep gratitude to you all and look forward to the discussions. Thank you.
Wow, definitely keeping in time there, Sahar. Way less than 10 minutes, the 10 minutes allocated. And again, thank you very much, Sahar, for providing us all with an overview of how IHL continues to apply and remain relevant even to new and emerging technologies. And again, aren't we all happy for Sahar to join us all the way from Geneva? All right, so now we've arrived at our open forum. And again, I would like to encourage everyone here, all of our participants, to actively engage with our panelists during this open forum. Before we open the floor though, I just want to give out some quick house rules so everyone will have a chance to speak. So may we request for all the participants who would be asking their questions to keep it within like 10 to 15 seconds. And also for our participants to keep your responses between 45 seconds to 1 minute. That way we could open up the floor to more people. All right, the floor is now open. We would also have some of our staff hand you the microphone if you are far from the microphone stands, which we have at the back and in the middle of the room. There we go. One of the staff, we have someone raising her hand on the third row. Ma'am? All right, here we go, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I am Maria Leonora Tuibeo from the Philippine Public Safety College. Good afternoon. My question is on the interconnectedness that you have mentioned a while ago. And we are coming up with a National Action Plan on SALW. My question is it not part of the National Action Plan on CBRN, the chemical, biological, and radiological and nuclear?
No, ma'am. No, but we work, they considered although draft NAP on SALW because that's under the purview of ATC-PMC, right? So ATC-PMC is also part of the TWG for the NAP on SALW. So they also consider it.
Follow up, pwede?
Yes,
I'm
ma'am,
just
go ahead.
wondering if
what could be more efficient to have one NAP or one legislation for all these materials of concern, strategic goods, or to have it separately, separate for biological, for chemical, radiological, and nuclear?
I answer that also. The problem with listing materials of this nature is because there are materials that are of dual use. And dual use materials can be used for valid civilian use and can be converted into illicit or chemical, biological, nuclear probably not, but chemical and biological bioterrorism or of terrorism of any kind. So if you list that, if you make a list, you will have to have like schedules for the list. Schedule 1 absolutely prohibited, Schedule 2 regulated, and the like. You cannot just make a single list for single listing, because the single listing would make it unnecessarily difficult to use valid dual-use technologies that are needed by hospitals or other industries. Thank you.
Sige. Ma'am, the Strategic Trade Management Act already lists the strategic goods that we have. As mentioned by Attorney Leasing, there are military goods, dual-use goods, and the third one is on our entirely national goods that although not military or dual use are decided on by the government that needs to be controlled. So proceeding from that, I don't think personally I think there's nothing wrong with having a separate NAP for CBRNE and a different NAP for SALWs, as long as because we take a look at the CBRNE and we give our inputs to that, and we, as well as the group taking part in the NAP on CBRNE is also included in for the NAP on SALWs.
All right, thank you so much for that. For those that would seek to ask questions, you could also fall in line at the microphones behind. And again, we also would like to encourage those that would be asking to please introduce yourselves as well, your name and your agency if possible. So do we have any more questions on the floor? A microphone, please, for ma'am.
Thank you so much. But as our USIC has said, IHL should not be a celebration. It should be every day. So my observation, I have two observations. Number one is we still are an ad hoc committee. After 10 million years, this is still an ad hoc committee. Maybe as a product of this year's celebration, if we can come out with a resolution from the body urging the president to finally create, maybe by executive order, so we don't have to go through Congress, by a commission on international humanitarian law, because we do have a commission on human rights. Why not a commission on international humanitarian law consisting of all the 17 government agencies that our kind USEC has mentioned? I said because the men here in uniform and the women in skirts would like to make this a formal resolution. Also, kanina kasama ko sa elevator, mga kababaihan, please stand up. All of these women in uniform there, they're the ones that are, and I'm so happily surprised that indeed there is no discrimination with the men and women in uniform. My second comment is, ma'am, It's new to me, these digital emblems. Could you point us to the right direction on how to learn more, and if there is any emerging technology we have to deal with? Because maybe when the kind senator returns to the Senate or to the we will have a third IHL. And to the academe, hanggang ngayon wala pa rin sa curriculum natin yung international humanitarian law. It still remains an elective. I understand it's not even a bar subject. So let us, I guess, as the kind senator says, we are all guilty here. We have to walk our talk.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I believe the first and third comments would be addressed best for Sir Fred. If you would want to comment on that. And then the question on ICRC, of course, Sahar.
Thank you.
Yeah, as an observer yet in the National IHL committee, ad hoc committee for the past I think 3 years, I fully support Ma'am Attorney Kapunan on that proposal. And we've been actually our men and women in uniform fully supports that. And I've heard from the office, I don't know if Yusek Katura is here. There's already been some progress on that. And we hope before next year's 25th anniversary, we would be able to have that, if not the law, but the executive order. Yeah, I fully support on that. Yes.
Thank you for that. Indeed, there's definitely more work to be done for the committee. And now over to Ms. Sahar.
Right, and I have to be between 45 seconds and 1 minute.
That's right, as much as we can.
All right, so just to say, I know that I didn't go into a lot of details regarding the emblem, but so what we're saying is, and this is really, the senator does not have to wait to go back to the Senate. This is really also something that is a movement-wide project. So already includes the national societies as well as the ICSC, and we are then consulting with states. So it started out as a consultation first among the movement, where it was discussed that when cyber operations do take place and are conducted against medical facilities and humanitarian organizations, they do have grave humanitarian concerns and consequences, and these must be addressed. And so what is a way to do it? And so the movement discussed that maybe a way to do it is how we do it also in the physical world, where we do it through an emblem in the physical world. Maybe we need something similar in the cyber or the virtual world as well. This then culminated into consultations with experts from around the world, including technological experts, legal experts, from civil society, from states, where the discussion was, what could such technical solutions look like? So the part that I skipped, that I said as a lawyer, I'm not able to explain so well, but those were some of the technological solutions that these experts then proposed. For the ICSC, what we've then done is that we've actually published a report on this back in November 2022, which is called Digitalizing the Red Cross, Red Crystal, and Red Crescent emblem. And the idea there really is that we propose these solutions. And now we, from the ICRC's side, we are in consultation with states to understand what their feeling and what their input is on these technological solutions, but also to see how does this fit into existing IHL, or does existing IHL need to be further developed to incorporate something such as this. But on the other hand, simultaneously, the Australian Red Cross, for instance, is also consulting with movement partners. Because, of course, when we talk about the protection of the medical mission and humanitarian organizations, we're speaking about also the national societies, right? So the Australian Red Cross is leading this process then with the national societies to see how this could be incorporated into national frameworks as well. So I hope that answers your question. No?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we do have to end this symposium right now, as we are short on time. Before we end, I would like to express my gratitude to each of our panelists here for their commitment to this vital cause. And I also extend, my heartfelt appreciation to our attendees, both on-site and online, for their dedication to learning and their devotion to promoting the principles of humanity, even in the midst of conflict. Now, Excellencies and ladies and gentlemen, finally, we have come to the end of the second part of our program. And to give his closing remarks, we are pleased to call on Deputy Assistant Secretary Jesus Enrique Garcia II of DFA UNIO.
Senator Richard Gordon, Undersecretary Jesus Gary Domingo, Secretary General Gwendolyn Pang, distinguished panelists, colleagues in government, the armed services, the police, the ICRC, and Red Cross, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, both in person and online. Thank you all so very much for joining us today at this celebration of International Humanitarian Law Day 2023 and participating in our symposium on IHL in the Philippines, Different Perspectives. We hope you were able to learn much about the Philippines' deep tradition and respect for IHL law and experiences. The Department of Foreign Affairs is proud to have partnered with the Department of National Defense and the entire membership of the IHL Ad Hoc Committee in organizing today's events. Allow me to give a special shout out and appreciation to our hardworking team at UNIO, including Director Edwin Mendoza, Mark, our MC, Ms. Ayesha Bajin, Ms. Joanna Harasa, members of our Division 6 Human Rights and Humanitarian Law team at UNIO, who work so hard tirelessly to make this event possible today. Let me also briefly just give you a sum up of some of the key messages that resonated with me and which I hope you might wish to take home with you after today's proceedings. First, we were reminded that IHL is needed, in fact, indispensable in response to today's resurgent and emerging conflicts and challenges as they preserve our dignity and common humanity, be they traditional, internal, or external conflicts, or new challenges such as autonomous weapons or cyber warfare. Second, the Philippines was recognized by virtually all speakers today as a leader in IHL for its work and laws and long-standing tradition of respect for IHL principles domestically, but also for its leadership in the global arena, for pushing the frontiers of IHL through its advocacies and ratification of instruments, promotion of international instruments at the United Nations and relevant disarmament fora. The personal roles of Secretary Manalo, of USEC Gary, of ASEC Isa Almuela were highlighted, including our candidature to the UN Security Council for 2027-2028, which was noted as a possible platform for our IHL advocacy and engagement. Third, Senator Gordon challenged all of us today to not just provide lip service to IHL, but to walk our talk and make IHL Day a reality every day and never fear of speaking truth to power. These are only a few of the main points which we discussed today, and there were many more during our very rich and varied discussions, such as we heard about ongoing initiatives, good practices, and lessons learned from the government and our civil society representatives, which further strengthen respect for IHL in our country and beyond. We also heard a very strong call to finally institutionalize the ad hoc IHL committee into something more meaningful, permanent, and responsive. And having worked in UNIO for the past 3 years, this is something that we really hope will take off and finally see fruition. Lastly, as USEC Gary, ASEC Isa, and Fred mentioned, at the end of the day, it's all about people, and we are a community. But moving forward, let us take steps to reach out to all the other communities out there, expanding the reach of IHL to communities in the Philippines and beyond, communities of combatants, communities of youth, communities of other vulnerable groups. Because only in doing so will we guarantee that IHL will live thoroughly and be the best guarantee that war, the horrors of war that we talked about today, that these can be contained, that they will not be indiscriminate, and thus that pathways to peace will always remain open and accessible, even in the bleakest of times. So with this, dear colleagues, sirs, ma'ams, may we all be active agents of IHL and leave here today with renewed commitment and resolve to uphold our common humanity, human rights, and dignity in times of armed conflict and all times. Thank you po and maraming salamat sa inyo.
All right. So once again, on behalf of DFA, it was my absolute pleasure to be your host for today's program. Please enjoy the rest of the afternoon. And yeah, apologies for running out of time for the symposium. At this point, there was requests for a group photo. So yeah, may we request. May we first request the speakers to please fall in line again in front for a photo and then afterwards with our participants as well. May we please call back to the front of the stage we have the speakers during the symposium, Attorney Lee Seng, Mr. Fred, Ms. Sahar.